During the first 2 decades of the 21st century, we witnessed some amazing events. The digital revolution, advances in medicine, and the evolution of human knowledge. We've experienced changes in the ways we govern, in the way we relate to each other, and in how we face the future. People's decisions and actions have determined the course of humanity like never before. These are the events and people that have helped write the timeline of this century. On February the 11th, 2013, the world learned of Pope Benedict XVI's decision to renounce his pontificate.
The news that we have just received of the intention of our Holy Father, Pope Benedict XVI, to resign effective the end of this month, the 28th of February, it came as an enormous surprise.
The separation of a supreme pontiff from the Church of St. Peter had not happened since 1415, when Pope Gregory XII was forced to resign. Joseph Ratzinger recognized his physical and mental weaknesses due to his advanced age and notified the cardinals of the Church of his inability to exercise the ministry that had been entrusted to him in 2005. On the 28th of February, in front of a crowd, Joseph Ratzinger said goodbye to his worshippers.
Padre e Figlio e Spirito Santo. Grazie, buonanotte. Grazie a
tutti. Following the rituals of the Church, on March the 12th, the doors of the conclave in the Vatican were closed again and would not be opened until the cardinals of the Church appointed God's new representative on earth. 2 days passed until the white smoke announced to the world that there was a new pope. Jorge Mario Bergoglio from Argentina was given the responsibility of governing the destiny of the Catholic Church. He adopted the name Francis in honor of Saint Francis of Assisi.
Fratelli e sorelle, buonasera.
Francis was the first Latin American and Jesuit clergyman to ever be appointed.
Es una emoción grande y como católica la emoción hubiera sido también con el Papa que la Iglesia necesita.
Criticized by some and loved by others, Pope Francis symbolizes an ideal of modernization within an institution that has barely changed in 2,000 years. Within the Catholic Church, possible reforms were being debated, while across the rest of the world, sensitive issues were being revealed as the result of espionage. In June 2013, The Guardian and The Washington Post published information about a spy network led by the National Security Agency. The world was being watched. Edward Snowden, a former employee of the United States Central Intelligence Agency, had copied and leaked more than 1.7 million secret documents. In his reports, Snowden revealed the existence of a sophisticated computer program known as PRISM, designed to monitor conversations and access data and information from people around the world, including their allies. According to Snowden, the National Security Agency had been intercepting emails, videos, photographs, voice and video calls, social media activity, passwords and other user data harvested by major internet companies in the United States. The reports revealed the spy network had infiltrated technology companies such as Microsoft, Google via YouTube, Yahoo, Facebook, AOL, Apple, and Paltalk. It didn't take long for governments and heads of state to openly complain to the White House about the violation of citizens' privacy and the intrusion into each country's state affairs. The President of France, François Hollande, and the Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel, claimed that the alleged espionage was unacceptable. The government in Washington defended itself by arguing that it was used to combat terrorism. It also accused Snowden of spying and stealing government information.
And he mentioned Eric Snowden, a traitor to the United States.
If we can't understand the policies and programs of our government, we cannot grant our consent in regulating.
In mid-2013, Russia granted him asylum, but forbade him to disclose any more information. After Snowden's leaks, the internet became a concern to governments. The international community demanded that the United States review the way its intelligence services operate.
And all of us in the IC had a wake-up call after Snowden's treachery. Unfortunately, the threat has not abated. And while I can't go into detail about the exact steps, I can assure you, our defenses will not be static. Our approach to security must be constantly evolving, and we will.
After 2013, confidence in social media was never the same. Whilst one person had the ability to change the way governments guard their secrets, thousands of people in another nation demonstrated the power of unity in the pursuit of justice and freedom. Students were the first to protest in November 2013. They demanded that President Viktor Yanukovych reverse his decision not to sign the agreement for Ukraine to join the European Union. If he signed, Ukraine risked making an enemy in its own backyard: Russia. Thousands of other protesters followed the students and filled Kiev's Independence Square. The most turbulent period in Ukrainian history was beginning. Even so, Yanukovych stood firm. He did not sign the agreement to join the European Union. After 3 months of violence, Yanukovych was ousted and an interim government was put in place. The worst seemed to be over, but this was only the beginning. Russian military forces took control of Crimea.
This is not the threat. This is actually the declaration of war to my country.
Violence returned to the streets, and once again, Ukraine was set alight.
We don't need Russian occupation, we don't need war.
While this was happening, in Kiev, Petro Poroshenko was elected president. One of his first steps was to sign the association agreement with the European Union. But it was too late. The country was already at war. More death and destruction was heaped on the conflict when, on the 17th of July 2014, a Malaysia Airlines plane with 298 people on board was shot down by a missile over the Ukrainian-Russian border. Both sides accused each other. Barack Obama blamed the pro-Russian rebels,
which is a threat to the world, as we saw in the appalling shoot-down of MH17.
7 months later, a peace agreement was reached. Today, there is little progress in the reforms of post-revolutionary Ukraine. Its battered economy has caused hundreds of thousands to migrate to European Union countries. In 2020, the conflict between Ukraine and Russia continues and has claimed the lives of some 13,000 people, according to the UN. After his dismissal, Viktor Yanukovych fled and became a refugee in Russia. He is wanted by the Ukrainian government for treason. Snowden's revelations and the Ukrainian situation would not be the only events to garner attention in 2013. A terrorist attack stained the Boston Marathon with blood, leaving 3 dead and 260 injured. Iran reached an agreement with the United States, Russia, and China, in which it pledged to halt its nuclear program for 6 months. Notable political leaders died that year: Margaret Thatcher in the United Kingdom and Nelson Mandela in South Africa. Disaster struck the Philippines. Haiyan, one of the most violent typhoons in history, caused 6,000 deaths and 2,000 people to go missing. Formula One driver Michael Schumacher suffered a serious accident while skiing, leaving him in a coma. And actor Paul Walker, star of the Fast and Furious saga, died in a traffic accident. Also in 2013, New Zealand, Uruguay, Brazil, and France all approved same-sex marriage. When we come back to Timeline of the Century, a new deadly epidemic strikes Africa, and an aviation tragedy seeks answers. In 2014, part of the population of Guinea in West Africa began to suffer from high fevers, vomiting, diarrhea, and internal bleeding. Getting infected was a death sentence. Fortunately, it didn't take much research to discover that this was an old enemy. The Ebola virus was back. Outbreaks of the virus had occurred over the years, but none as violent as the one that appeared in 2014. After the first reports, neighboring countries such as Sierra Leone, Liberia, Nigeria, Senegal, and Mali reported multiple cases.
We are at a very critical moment in our response now. We need to sustain the response. We need to ensure more efficiency in collaboration in the response.
The alerts that declared it a public health problem were activated too late. Ebola was already an out-of-control epidemic.
We are seeing what we call a biosafety level 4 pathogen spreading unhindered in these countries. Nothing will stop that from spreading internationally. Travel bans won't stop it. Neither will anything else we do other than to stop it at its source.
For 2 years, the virus hit the region hard and even spread to countries such as Italy, Spain, the United Kingdom, and the United States. By March 2016, the World Health Organization reported more than 28,000 cases and 11,310 deaths. It was one of the most violent epidemics known to man. The World Health Organization and organizations like Doctors Without Borders continue to fight against the virus. In addition to the deaths, the epidemic deeply wounded tourism and the economy of the African continent. But the virus's most terrible legacy was fear. The international community is terrified of the possibility that a mutation of the virus could lead to another epidemic with numerous fatalities. While scientists were searching for a cure for Ebola, the search for the remains of a plane crash was generating more questions than answers. The goodnight call from the captain of Malaysian Airlines flight MH370 to the Kuala Lumpur control tower would be the last one ever made. Shortly after the call, the aircraft disappeared from radars. With 239 passengers and crew on board. The flight departed from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing on March 8, 2014. Most of the passengers were Chinese citizens, and the captain, Zahari Ahmad Shah, was one of the airline's most experienced pilots. About an hour after takeoff, there was no further sign of the plane. The search began 4 hours later, covering the South China Sea where the plane disappeared. But flight MH370 was not there. Later, a military radar revealed that after the aircraft disappeared, it had changed direction. This helped authorities conclude that the plane may have crashed in the Indian Ocean near Australia, thousands of kilometers from the location initially indicated by Malaysia Airlines. Suspicions of a cover-up began to emerge.
And I think even governments have to play their role, careful with what they say, what they don't say.
Investigators concluded it was an intentional act. The suspect? Captain Zahari, who appears to have taken his own life. According to close friends, there's a possibility that Zahari had been suffering from depression. It was also discovered that he had been practicing a similar route to Flight 370 on a simulator before the crash. Remains of the plane appeared in Africa. In July 2015, some remains were found off the coast of the island of Réunion, east of Madagascar. And at the end of February 2016, more were found off the coast of Mozambique. Three years after the plane's disappearance, the official search mission was called off.
With some level of sadness, certainly with a great deal of frustration and disappointment that I stand here and acknowledge that the underwater search effort has been suspended.
It was the longest rescue mission in aviation history. The search efforts totaled $145 million. Only some pieces of the aircraft were found, and none of the 239 passengers and crew were ever recovered.
It's important that they don't give up so easily, because if this were ever to happen again, we want to know that the people responsible will be committed.
The crucial question remains unanswered. What happened that night? Other events that wrote the history of 2014. The murder of a young African-American man, Michael Brown, in Ferguson, Missouri, sparked a wave of anti-racism protests in the United States. In Nigeria, the terrorist group Boko Haram broke into a school and kidnapped 276 teenagers. Also in 2014, the world of literature mourned the death of Colombian Nobel Prize winner Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Pakistani Malala Yousafzai became the youngest person ever to win the Nobel Peace Prize for her activism for educational rights for girls at the age of 17. Germany beat Brazil 7-1 at home in the semi-final of the 2014 World Cup. This was the most painful defeat for the Brazilian national team since the Maracanazo in 1950. Upon return in timeline of this century, we'll meet a drug dealer who became a master of escape and discover how an unexpected royal resignation shook Spanish society. In 2014, suitcases were being packed at the Royal Palace in Madrid. On June 2nd, 2014, Mariano Rajoy, head of the Spanish government, officially announced that King Juan Carlos I was making the difficult decision to abdicate the throne. Juan Carlos I was proclaimed king in 1975. This came after the death of the dictator Francisco Franco, and 44 years after the exile of his grandfather Alfonso XIII, who had been the last king of Spain before the Second Republic. During his reign, Juan Carlos used his power to facilitate the transition to democracy. He renounced the powers inherited from the dictatorship and became a parliamentary monarch with symbolic powers. In 1981, he took a decisive stand against an attempted military coup, which sought to return the new democratic regime to the Franco model. His role in the Spanish transition to democracy, his support for European unity, and his contribution to diplomatic relations with various countries were widely recognized. But from 2011, the public image of the king and the Spanish royal house began to deteriorate due to accusations of corruption involving the king's youngest daughter, Princess Cristina, and her husband. For 3 years, the institution, the king, and his family were in the spotlight. The need for change was felt in Spanish society. Juan Carlos de Bourbon chose to abdicate the throne. On the very day of his resignation, left-wing parties called for a referendum to abolish the monarchy and establish a republic. The request was rejected on September the 16th in Congress, with 274 votes against, 26 in favor, and 15 abstentions. On the 19th of June 2014, the Prince of Asturias, Felipe de Borbón, became king and head of the Spanish state.
Juro desempeñar fielmente mis funciones, guardar y hacer guardar la Constitución y las leyes y respetar los derechos de los ciudadanos y de las comunidades autónomas.
La monarquía en España va a cambiar inevitablemente porque ellos son distintos. Los nuevos reyes son distintos, muy distintos a los anteriores, con una educación distinta, un bagaje cultural distinto.
The 39 years of Juan Carlos I's reign will be remembered by the Spanish as a period of the country's greatest economic prosperity. But his greatest legacy, and one that will remain in history, was his tireless work to defend the democracy that Spaniards enjoy today. Every human being writes their own history. Others want to escape from it. Films, series, and books. The numerous escapades of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman cemented his position in the Hall of Fame as one of the world's most wanted drug traffickers. El Chapo Guzman came from a poor Mexican family. To help his parents, he began growing marijuana and connecting with drug cartels. He was a member of the Guadalajara cartel and worked his way up through the organization to form his own criminal structure, the Sinaloa cartel. He became the main drug trafficker in the Aztec country. By then, he already knew how to escape prison. In 1993, he was arrested in Guatemala, extradited to Mexico, and sentenced to 20 years in the maximum security prison of Puente Grande in Jalisco. After 8 years, in 2001, he escaped. Guzman spent 13 years evading justice and expanding his drug trafficking network. He made it onto the list of the most powerful men in the world, according to Forbes magazine, as well as being on the US government's most wanted list. In February 2014, Guzman was captured in Mazatlan, Sinaloa, in a joint operation between the Mexican Navy, the DEA, and US Marshals. On July the 11th, 2015, he escaped again through a mile-long tunnel with artificial light, ventilation ducts, and a motorcycle adapted for his escape. An incredible feat of engineering.
Se ofrece una recompensa de hasta 60 millones de pesos a quien o quienes proporcionen información útil, veraz y oportuna que auxilie eficientemente a la localización y detención de Joaquín Guzmán Loera.
In January 2016, the president of Mexico, Enrique Peña Nieto, reported that Joaquín Guzmán had been captured. Again.
Esta mañana, en el municipio de Los Mochis, Sinaloa, integrantes de las instituciones de seguridad del Gobierno de la República lograron detener a Joaquín Guzmán Loera.
After almost a year of trials, El Chapo Guzman was extradited to the United States, and on July 17, 2019, he was sentenced to life in prison for drug trafficking, murder conspiracy, and money laundering. He was held at the Maximum Security Administrative Penitentiary in Florence, Colorado, known as the Alcatraz of the Rockies. To date, Guzman is the only person who has escaped from a maximum security prison in Mexico twice. Other events that wrote the history of 2015 were Mauricio Macri won the presidency in Argentina after 12 years of Kirchnerist governments. Bruce Jenner, a former Olympic athlete, told journalist Diane Sawyer that this would be their last interview as a man, as she revealed her identity as a transgender woman. And the United States legalized same-sex marriage. When we come back in Timeline of the Century, the advance of ISIL, one of the world's most dangerous terrorist groups, threatens the fragile peace of the Middle East. Whilst terror spread in the United States on September the 11th, 2001, the discord would not stop with those terrible events. In the Middle East, a sinister group would soon begin to spread its roots. Poverty, war, and revenge. In the face of the Western response to September the 11th, 2001, and the weakening of Al-Qaeda in 2014, the Islamic State, ISIL, emerged in northern Iraq. The organization's leader, the late Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, had sought a civil war between the Sunnis and Shiites. He desired the establishment of a government ruled by a caliph, who, according to Muslim belief, is the successor and delegate of the Prophet Muhammad. ISIL used fear as a letter of introduction. Suicide attacks, decapitations, and mass murders illustrated their dark vision. In 2014, ISIL succeeded in gaining control of northern Iraq and eastern Syria. As they advanced, they managed to control up to 40% of Iraqi territory, which was inhabited by nearly 8 million people. 30,000 fighters from nearly 100 countries have been drawn to the cause of the terrorist group. They have been sustained financially by illegal oil sales and taxes, thus maintaining a self-sufficient economy with a budget of up to $81 million a month. By 2014, ISIL stopped its expansion and declared a caliphate in the controlled territory. The following year, in 2015, a counter-offensive carried out by the Iraqi army under the tutelage of the American army began to succeed. ISIL began to lose territory.
In Iraq and Syria, American leadership, including our military power, is stopping ISIL's advance.
The breaking point came in 2017, when the city of Mosul, an ISIL enclave, was liberated. By December, the last remnants of control of this terrorist group in Iraq had vanished. Despite having lost power, ISIL still operates in cell mode in countries such as Mali, the Philippines, Turkey, and Morocco, and its constant threats keep the world alert to new attacks. / 2015 also left us with other events that made headlines. 2 armed men attacked the Paris offices of the French satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo, leaving 12 people dead and 11 more injured. The attack was in response to the publication of cartoons mocking the Prophet Muhammad. The New York Times reported that during her time as Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton used her personal email for official business. The information generated a major political scandal that affected her campaign for the US presidency in 2016. In the so-called fight of the century, American boxer Floyd Mayweather won against Manny Pacquiao by a unanimous decision, making his number of undefeated fights a record 48. Next on Timeline of the Century, Paris, the city of light, suffers one of the harshest terrorist attacks in its history.
They are coming from the exit of artists, and they didn't know what to do. I saw the bodies on the floor.
On Friday, November the 13th, 2015, 80,000 people packed the Stade de France to watch a football match between France and Germany. What was supposed to be a celebration ended in a nightmare. 3 explosions outside the stadium marked the beginning of the worst terrorist attack in French history.
Boum! L'explosion. Pour moi, c'est lui qui s'était fait sauter.
President François Hollande, who was in the stadium, was immediately evacuated. Almost at the same time, just kilometers away from the stadium at the Bataclan Theatre, at least 3 men entered a room, shot into the crowd, and held at least 100 people hostage for 3 hours.
It was terrible for us, General, you know, because we were not prepared for such a shock. And when I got rescued, I arrived in the middle of a bloody battlefield.
"90 people died that night in the Bataclan.
It's really not easy at all to see someone dying and to stop and to help them when your own life is in danger. It's not an easy thing to do. It's the hardest thing in the world to do, and I saw countless kids do it over and over again.
4 other attacks were recorded simultaneously in an area of Paris bustling with restaurants. In total, 130 people were killed and hundreds were injured that night. The Islamic State took responsibility as a response to French involvement in the war against ISIL in Operation Chamal Hollande. For President Hollande, the terrorist attack was an act of war. Days later, French planes deployed their full force over Syria. Meanwhile, in France, the alleged leader of the attacks was killed by the police. But it was too late. Fear had been sown forever into the lives of Parisians. These were not the only events of 2015 that shook the world. Hurricane Patricia, one of the strongest in history, hit the Mexican coast. In April of that year, Apple launched its first smartwatch. Joseph Blatter resigned from the FIFA presidency after a corruption scandal that involved the arrests of several football personalities. Upon return in Timeline of the Century, the dream of conquering and living on another planet is near. There are those who claim that the future of the human race lies outside of planet Earth. On September the 28th, 2015, NASA scientists announced that evidence of liquid water had been found on the surface of Mars.
Finding a place where liquid water seeps across the surface of Mars, and presumably is underground as well, gives you a setting where life could exist.
For decades, humans had questioned whether water on Mars would ever be found. Years of speculation had finally come to an end. The presence of poles, craters, riverbeds, canyons, and signs of erosion are almost unmistakable signs. In the new millennium, surface hydrogen and evidence of water vapor was detected. But it wasn't until 2015 that evidence of liquid water was finally found. Five years previously, in 2010, some spots had been observed, appearing and disappearing with the seasons. Scientists called them reoccurring slope lineae. These spots were suspected of marking the location of liquid water. Hydrated minerals that require water to form were found. The theory suggests that the salt water that runs along the steep slopes during the warm months produces the marks. Then the water freezes during the colder seasons. Most of the flow runs underground, and a small part comes to the surface, forming the grooves. The findings support the idea that planet Mars has possible water activity, which changes with the seasons and perhaps has the necessary ingredients to support life.
Mars really would have been quite a habitable planet for life to have existed. We know that there was once salty water there, and that kind of environment on Earth is the type of place where life can flourish.
Research has continued, and the data is encouraging the world's space agencies to plan future missions to Mars in the next decade, in which they hope to include humans. Our journey isn't over. We will continue to witness momentous events. A past that invites us to contemplate our future. We will continue to relive the events and meet the characters who wrote the stories of the first 2 decades of the 21st century. Moments and situations that remind us that it's our decisions and actions that shape the world we live in. Those that have written the timeline of the century.